talked to Dave. Dave told me I need to do an emergency podcast and talk about this weirdness of Kamala Harris being the vice presidential candidate. And so I'm doing it. Here's the emergency podcast. It's still episode 200. This is Gene, and you're listening to Dumbasses Talking Politics. Hey, this is Gene, and you're listening to Dumbasses Talking Politics, and today is, I don't know what day is, a Tuesday or something, but whatever. We just got notification that Joe Biden has picked his running mate. I'm sorry, I'm reading Dave. Dave and I started texting each other. I should really have him on there. We were texting each other, and we were talking about, can't believe it. He said emergency podcast. I already had it set up. I actually had my podcast set up for tonight, right now. He said, do it now, blue, blue, blue. And then Dave was kind of something today. He made a very good comment. Let's get into it first. Joe Biden decided to pick Kamala Harris as his vice presidential candidate. And I can only say, wow. So, Dave just sent me a couple of things, and everything is right. So Dave sat back, he texted me, is she going to have sex with Biden? And he gave an emoji of scared emoji. She is going to kill him. Is Biden older than Brown? And he's referring to Willie Brown, which we're going to talk about. Or is that her type? Look out, Bernie. He spelled Bernie wrong, but that's okay. This has got to be, without a doubt, the funniest pick. We're going to have so much fun. So let's talk about this. So if you haven't figured it out, Kamala Harris was selected as the vice presidential candidate for Joe Biden, and she's a disaster. The two absolutely hate each other. But let's take a look at the pros and cons of Kamala Harris. So first off, let's look at the cons of Kamala Harris. She had an affair with former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. He set her up with a spot in the district attorney's office, which started her political career. And if you're not really sure, yes, that's corruption. And a lot of people can't believe Willie Brown said anything. I think probably Kamala Harris couldn't believe it, but the reality is that was something that was already out there. By the way, at the time, Willie Brown was actually married. So she's got some moral issues too. She's just not, she is a climber. That's what she is. And she doesn't care how she has to climb. Wait for it. And Dave said it in the text messages I just read to you. But it's very interesting. She has a voting record that can be used by Republicans. And her voting record, while she was in Senate, she's only been in Senate for 4 years, that voting record can be used against her. Look at how crazy she is. They could use clips of her during the Kavanaugh hearings, clips of her lying, things like that. So this is not an easy thing to deal with. Susan Rice, who was supposed to be the one, actually a lot of people thought Susan Rice would have been the one that they would have picked because she has no record. They picked someone who they can actually use. So Susan Rice would have been a terrible candidate too. She would have been an absolutely god-awful candidate. But it is what it is. Okay, so I got a feeling that what the Republicans are going to do, if they're smart in any way, what they're going to do is they're going to take clips of her record, clips of her talking, and they're going to use those clips to turn off moderate and independent voters. That's what they're going to end up doing. And they should. And there are plenty of them. Trust me, there are plenty of them. I guarantee you Grabien is going to be releasing a gaffe montage of Kamala Harris soon. It'll happen. Okay, next thing. Her record as a prosecutor is not going to be embraced by the left or the Bernie bros. because already the Bernie bros and the left are not exactly 100% on Biden, because Biden is actually kind of a moderate. Here's the thing. When she was a prosecutor, she did something really weird. She put people in jail for committing crimes. And for some reason, that became a thing that is bad. I don't understand it either. Maybe you do. I don't. But that's going to be something that is going to haunt her. And believe me, Trump is going to hit. Don't be shocked if Trump hits her harder than he hits Biden. All he has to do with Biden is say he's retarded. He's not retarded. That's a bad word. Yeah, it is a good word, but he's senile. He's done. So let's attack Kamala Harris because that's your next president. Biden doesn't have 6 months in the presidency if he wins. Let's call it what it is. She is actually going to be the president before 2024 if Biden wins. She's unlikable. She really is unlikable. She is almost a doll. And I don't mean that in a sexual way, because a lot of people, will talk about that in a second too, because that's a thing. She is a porcelain doll. She flip-flops. She appears inauthentic. She appears she's trying to make herself look fantastic. She is just not a person that people are going to embrace. Now, granted, she only has to have one debate against Pence versus Trump having 3 debates against Biden. But the reality of the matter is, Pence is going to kill Kamala Harris in a debate. So that's going to be something. She has no experience. She was a prosecutor for a few years, and then she was a senator for 4 years. Now, that's more along the line of Barack Obama. Barack Obama did that. He became a senator just so that he could run for president, and he happened to win. But not a lot of experience. And finally, she says some weird things, and she has a really creepy laugh. And this is going to turn people off. I truly believe this is going to turn a lot of people off. But here's the thing. She does have some advantages that Biden can actually use. And this is something that this was actually, I think, besides Susan Rice, this was the safe pick. She's a black woman, and the left, that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted a black woman. She's pretty. I wouldn't date her, but she is easy on the eyes. She's not an ugly woman. Okay, if they had picked Jean Kirkpatrick, I think they would have had a lot of other problems. But she's not a bad-looking woman. She's liberal, but moderate. She appears uncomfortable with some of the leftist ideals and policies. And she looked uncomfortable during the debates. And I think that's why that's where her inauthenticity comes into play. That it's kind of, well, yeah, we should give illegal aliens health insurance, but, maybe we shouldn't. In that way, she is a lot like Biden. In that Biden just wants to be a moderate. Well, I don't think Biden wants anything. I think Biden wants his mashed potatoes, and that's about it. But she's kind of a moderate, and she's uncomfortable with leftist policies. The big advantage, she's already been vetted. There's nothing we don't know about her right now. We know about her and Willie Brown. We know about, all what she did in the DA's office in San Francisco. There's nothing really to hide with her. So does that mean there's nothing when people start really digging into her past? Of course not. There probably is something. But it's going to be up to Fox News, Daily Wire, and the other conservatives to actually find it, because it's not going to happen. I think Sleepy Creepy Joe has other issues here, though. She is a climber, and he can't trust her as far as he can throw her. As Ben Shapiro said, he better get a food taster. And he better make sure he does not go alone with her to Camp David if he wins. because he will be coming back in a body bag, and she will be sworn in before she even enters her limo on the way back to the helicopter to bring her back to the White House. She is a very, very iffy human being morally. She's a very iffy human being ethically. She's just got some things that are really wrong with her. But if she becomes president, I don't think she's going to have the balls to do a lot of things that the Bernie bros want to do. And that's going to turn off the Bernie bros. And it's just like, honestly, it's like these people knew about it already. A group of Democratic women today decided to release a letter to the major news outlets screaming not to be sexist or racist by criticizing the vice presidential candidate. Wow. Really? How did you guys know that this was coming out today, that you were going to release this? The letter states, "We are reaching out now because we are about to embark on a historic moment. Once again, having a woman on a presidential campaign ticket. While you have already done significant reporting on the process, we know you are actively preparing for coverage about specific Democratic vice presidential nominee. Given how few women have reached this point, the sometimes disappointing coverage of the process to date, and the double standards we've seen in the public and media expectations of women leaders over the years, and even more so for black and brown women leaders," and note, and you'll have to go to the website to see this, but black and brown are actually capitalized, which is incorrect grammar. I'll continue. "We want to respectfully share some thoughts with you about the media's role in the scrutiny and coverage of women and women of color candidates in general, and the vice presidential candidate in particular." Wow, that's awesome. So in other words, they're going to tell you how to cover this individual. So I got more of this letter from the Daily Wire, and it states, quote, "Specifically, the women warn journalists to avoid sexism and racism by avoiding commentary on Biden's running mate's ambition," which means they already know, "her relationships with partners and staff, her likability, her looks, including her weight, style of dress, attractiveness, and tone of voice." I've just violated everything by talking. "Whether the candidate is likable or electable, or any reporting on heritage of black women or women of color that perpetuates a misunderstanding about who is legitimately American." Now, mind you, I read that from the Daily Wire. So let's break that down, because this is pretty awesome. Specifically, women warn journalists to avoid sexism and racism by avoiding, here we go, commentary on Biden's running mate's ambition. This woman was ambitious. She entered the DA's office, became a DA, became an aggressive DA where she threw people in jail. And that is not something the left wants to hear. Okay. And she became a DA, an elected DA, by her relationships with partners and staff. She was having sex with Willie Brown, and apparently more than Willie Brown, so that she could actually get put into the DA's office at first. I would see why the left wouldn't want anyone to know that. I wouldn't want anyone to know that if it was me. So they're basically saying, shut up, don't say anything about it. Let's look. Her likability. She's not likable. I just said that. She's not likable. Nobody And by the way, what does likability have anything to do with sexism and racism? You mean I can't dislike a black person or a brown person? A person of color? There was a guy I worked with. I didn't particularly like him. Does that mean I'm a racist? She is an unlikable human being. This is something the left is trying to hide. Her looks, including her weight, style of dress, attractiveness, and tone of voice. again, this is, I don't know about her weight. I've never really looked at her body. She is pretty. There's no question she's pretty. But I think that's going to be used by people to sit back and say, well, that's why he got her. She's pretty. Why didn't you get the fat chick from frickin' Georgia who lost the Georgia governor's election? I can't remember her name because she's so irrelevant to me. I'm not exactly sure why that's, again, racist or even sexist, to be honest with you. Tone of voice. That's something really weird. It's not weird. She laughs funny. She's got a really strange, Wicked Witch of the West laugh. It is not, it's a turnoff. But now what they're basically telling you, it's a turnoff because you are a racist or a sexist or whether. Whether the candidate is likable or electable, again, here's the thing. Likable comes in. That's the second time they've said likable. She's not likable. They're basically doubling down, saying you can't sit there and say she's not likable. You have to... She's not electable. She has no experience. No experience. She was a DA for a few years, and then she became a senator for 4 years. Is she electable? Is she ready for the presidency? Probably not. So, in other words, you can't sit back and say that this woman has no experience and shouldn't be a president. And any reporting on heritage of black women or women of color that perpetuates a misunderstanding about who is legitimately American. This is why I always use the term black. Kamala Harris is not an African American. Kamala Harris has got roots in the Caribbean. You can't call her an African American. The news media can't call her an African American. Why? Because she's not African American. She's Caribbean American. I guess that's going to be a thing. That matters, I guess. I don't think it matters to me. But that is a thing. So this whole thing was just, that is awesome. But that's what Democrats do. Democrats will sit back and they shield their people with intersectionality and identity politics. And the reality is, regular people, which is most of us, do not buy into identity politics or intersectionality. We don't. I don't give a damn if she's a black woman. It could care less. Is she qualified? The answer is no. Is she likable? Absolutely not. Can she actually address a very difficult situation that may save our country? My answer would be right now, looking at her and her record, no, not at all. She's a climber. She's a terrible human being. She's immoral. And as Dave said, I can't be sure she hasn't slept with Joe Biden yet. And I tell you what, I can't be sure 6 months from now if Biden wins the election and Biden is being carted out of Camp David because he died, that Kamala didn't kill him if she wasn't there. So that's the problem with the left. Ignore it. Here's what they're actually doing. Honestly, here's what they're actually doing. They're pointing out the problem. They're actually pointing out the problems that she has. I want to retweet that letter 3,000 times and make sure everyone reads that tweet because with their letter. Because they're actually pointing out this gal has problems. You're not allowed to talk about it. That's what they're saying. If you're talking about, we're going to call you a racist, sexist. Here's something. They should have said misogynist. That would have been better. Here's the problem with this whole thing. No one cares. No one cares. Most people do not care. Probably 3/4 of the country do not care. They want to know what this gal is about. But I just thought this was it was a safe pick. I will say it was a safe pick for Biden. I think any one of those other people were kind of questionable. But it was not a great pick. And this is what happens when you are limited to picking someone based off their race and gender and not picking the best candidate. Because I got news to you. Eric Swalwell would have been a better candidate, vice presidential candidate than Kamala Harris. Cory Booker would have been a better presidential, even though he's kind of creepy too, would have been a better vice presidential candidate than Kamala Harris. I could name 15 people that would have been better, but he was stuck with the intersectionality, and he had to he had to pick what the left wanted. And I gotta be honest with you, this is why I think Biden will lose. I don't think he picked the person that the left wanted, because she is not a leftist. It's going to be interesting to say. Okay, so we're done with the emergency podcast. I'm going to set it up, and good news is I have a podcast ready tomorrow, so we'll set that up tomorrow. I'll probably have to do, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I've never done this before. So you can follow me on Twitter at RunninFool, RUNNINFEWL. You can download or listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, and YouTube. Visit my website at www.dumbassestalkingpolitics.com to take a look at some of the links that I have, and I actually have my notes. This is Gene, and you've listened to Dumbasses Talking Politics.